There's a purity in the number 46 car that maybe was the most pure example of a Porsche race car ever. This really does represent the beginning. And you know, there's no doubt to me of the significance of the car and how it fits into the racing heritage and the production heritage and the brand heritage. There's probably no other car brand that is as closely related to one event in racing than Porsche, and that event would be the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Here's a car that sits there that just has an amazing history that will be never touched. You know, it is that car. When I look at the 46 car, you know, this is just basically a hand-built example of exactly what a Porsche should be in that time. It was lightweight, it was aerodynamic, it was rear engine. The sum of its parts were really what Porsche is about. There's so much magic in Rod's place. This little shop there is creating something that's so important to the brand. The family hands touch that car. And I think that's something really special because there's all sorts of processes of building something now that kind of pulls the human side away. But in 1951, this was a pure human effort. And the fact that the family's hands touched that effort and moved that car forward, and maybe we're pushing on the back of it to push it up to the grid, or any of these kinds of things that happened were never to happen again.
To me, for sports car racing, the history of Le Mans and the existence of Le Mans was everything in terms of racing. That's ground zero, that's the Mecca.
They show up at Le Mans in 1951, first race ever as a car company. With 2 cars, they crash one. They not only beat the 1100cc car, but they beat all the 1500 cars. And it's just the launching point for everything that that company stands for today. And it's, in my opinion, the most significant, the most important Porsche in history.
What they pulled off in the context of the times is quite remarkable. I think there was a lot of luck. It was a huge moment for them that could have easily not happened.
You have to appreciate and look at the most historical point in this car's history. And that was that point in time when it crossed the finish line at Le Mans in 1951 as the beginning of all Porsche Motorsport. So my first real experience with the 356 SL cars was when I was a kid. You know, being around my dad's Porsche parts shop, I was always drawn to the cars with the fender skirts. You know, those 356s that had the wheel spats on them. When I first started looking at building cars with my father, the one car that I wanted to build my first car after was the number 46 Le Mans car. And so my dad helped me find a 1953 coupe. We backdated it to put body bumpers on it and split the windshield and hood straps. And, you know, so many characteristics were drawn from the early 356 SL cars, and specifically the number 46.
In '93, my goal was to have a Pre-A Cabriolet race car. But I had to find somebody that could build a race car like that. When I saw Rod's blue Pre-A coupe race car coming off the track, it was, yes, I want to meet these guys. They know how to do it.
You know, next thing you know, we're building a car for him. Cameron's first race car, it was a 54 Cabriolet. Cameron went and raced that for a lot of years.
And ironically, the design that he proposed brought in elements of the SL Gamoon cars.
We modeled kind of the design of that car after Chuck Forge's Red Roadster, one of the early 356 SLs.
When I first saw the SL at the '93 Monterey Historic Races, I fell in love with that car, and I did introduce myself to the owner, Chuck Forge.
You know, unfortunately, Chuck passed away in 2009. They came to us and said, you know, the car's going to be for sale, and would you be interested?
I was 70% confident that it was the first Le Mans car and had enough level of confidence that with research, it could be proven.
When Cameron made the decision to purchase the car, then it was time to figure out really what the history of this car was.
You know, the strategy was prove it and build it back to Le Mans 1951. Is it possible that it was only on the front at Le Mans? But there was one breakthrough document that showed a requisition to send the cars for Le Mans, and that listed chassis numbers. And that's the only document that identifies which chassis numbers were prepared, and of course it includes number 063.
You know, after a couple of years of doing research and sifting through the Collier Museum in Naples, Florida, Cameron went back to the archives in Germany. We were able to ultimately compile a document, gave us 11 physical characteristics, both photographic and physical markings on the car, and comparison data that allowed us to be very confident that chassis number 63 was not only a Le Mans entry car, but was the first Porsche to win at Le Mans.
Our endeavor was not to make this better than they were, but to make it as exact as they were.
And this is chassis 063 with the top removed, overlaid on top of 055.
It became very clear to me that this thing was going to be a challenge to restore exactly back to how it raced at Le Mans. Because as you look at the history of this car, it's had so many different personalities. After it ran Le Mans, it was then immediately reconfigured to do the Liège-Rome-Liège Rally. It was then reconfigured for the speed trials at Montfleury. Then it was reconfigured and brought here to the United States to be sold as a street car. And then John von Neumann raced it a few times and then cut the roof off. You know, I've built nearly 150 cars, but I don't think that anything that I've done up to this point had so many layers.
He had to be in the heads of those designers and mechanics. He really went back to that time, all the way from old gas welding techniques and methods of riveting, making sure it had the right manufacture of bolts with the proper codes.
I didn't have any blueprints. I didn't have any real examples to draw off of.
Porsche had very few documents about that era. There had been a fire. A good part of their early archives were destroyed.
One of the biggest challenges is to uncover enough information that you're confident in knowing that's how it was, but also figuring out how to rebuild the pieces that weren't there. Every little piece had to be tweaked just a little bit. You know, all these little details that I knew I had to get just right. Digging deep into my 26, 27 years of building Porsches and trying to put myself in the place of the craftsmen that were building these cars back in the day. So for me, that was the biggest challenge, but also the part that I loved the most because it was uncharted territory. So early on in the restoration, Cameron and I had set a goal to have the car initially completed and done for RENNSPORT in 2015. Then about 10 months before RENNSPORT, I expressed to Cameron that I just didn't feel like we could present the car in a completely finished state at RENNSPORT. But then after some discussions with Cameron, we figured, what the heck, let's see if they're interested in displaying it in an unfinished state.
Our good friend Jeff Zwart, he went back to Porsche North America and proposed this, and they said, that'd be great.
The pressure was on. Remember, there was a third of the car missing, so definitely, you know, a pretty daunting task, but.
The morning that it rolled out of the trailer at Laguna Seca on that Wednesday morning, that was an emotional moment for all of us.
I don't think I realized how special that event was really gonna be. It didn't hit me until Jeff Zwart invited me to take the car and roll it into the studio and get photos of it. And then to have my family get behind the thing and push it in front of the 917, the 919, and all the other Porsches was a bit of a spiritual experience for me, because the first time that car had really been seen in public with the roof back on it, and it was being reunited with all the other cars that had come after it. And to me, that was a very special moment, not only for me, but also for that car. And it was almost like the entire family of Porsches was lined up saluting this car as we were pushing it up to the field.
And I got choked up. It just felt like we were part of something much bigger than us.
And to think that all those cars that were lined up came because of the heroic effort of this little car in 1951. And to think how differently it could have been if Porsche wouldn't have pushed so hard to win that first race. So after RENNSPORT, Cameron and I had made a decision that the best place to share this car with the world in a finished state was going to be Pebble Beach in August of 2016. So that meant we had 11 months to get this car finished. And through all the research and data that we had, there was very little information on the interior of the car. That required a lot of help from many of my friends at Porsche. Thorsten Klein rallied a team of people together and tracked down Herbert Linga that was part of the build team in 1951. We were able to find out exactly what the material was.
Just coincidentally, an entire bolt of the driver's seat fabric was discovered in the back of a fabric warehouse in Los Angeles. This was the fabric.
There were decisions that we had made throughout the restoration process that later on we revised and redid because of new information. Just a few weeks before we finished the car and took it to Pebble Beach, there was a book of photographs presented to me that nobody had ever seen. Part of me was like, I wish I would have never seen them, because it meant more sleepless nights and slight modifications to certain parts that we were putting on the car. But I'll forever be grateful for those photographs, because they were photographs that answered so many questions that I was really using my instincts to answer up to that point. that point, awards didn't matter. The publicity, all that other stuff really didn't matter.
It was a number of emotions. It was kind of elation that we were there, that we were actually making it. The car was done. We were actually about to achieve our goal.
And my instinct was they were going to love it, but then there's always that little bit of fear that they're going to hate it.
I wasn't nervous. I was excited.
As the crowd started to pour in and the groups of all the judges started making their way over and holding their little notebooks, I can remember these guys listening and asking questions that kind of gave me that easy feeling, knowing that they truly appreciated not only the history of this car, but the effort and the level and the point-in-time restoration that we presented this car.
I think it was my wife. She said, "Get back here quick. Rod's in the car warming up." You know, the feeling of that moment, I just felt we were winning by being invited and getting it done and presenting it.
This is a very historic Porsche. It was Porsche's first win in an international race. It really put the Porsche mark on the map in sports car racing.
There were plenty of moments where I, second-guessed myself or questioned what I was doing. But at the end of the day, I just had to rely on my instinct and my gut. It worked.